Hello and welcome back. So I've been getting some requests to do a top streamers from the previous week video or a, hot and cold players type of thing. So I used to do this on Monday mornings when I had a lot more free time. I don't have as much free time. So today we're going to go through the player hub and just kind of pick out a couple of players that are trending up, trending down, and go over some of these details a little bit here. So you can see here that I've added these metrics to the player hub, and I've filtered these to 35 or greater in terms of combined ratings. So that's going to filter out guys like Drew Hellison with only one game played, 2 points in that one game, but it's still a small sample size, so we want to filter that out. Now, right off the top, you can see Thomas Nosek is not necessarily the best. You can see a lot of these guys who are going to have this higher number, they started really low. So he was way back here at a 16.5 up to a 37, so barely making the cut. Only 2 points in 7 games, so maybe not the best streaming option. But Juuso Parssinen, who has flashed in previous seasons, he had a pretty decent showing over the last couple games. So 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points in the last 8 games, 1 power play point, but 20 hits in that span. So the 2 hits per game is one of the reasons why he's been bumped up. Not necessarily always because of offensive production. Sometimes they're getting hits and blocks, and that's going to increase their value. So Parssinen getting a little bit of time in the middle 6, I believe, for Nashville as they try to find some offense in their game lately. They did get a nice win last night in Vancouver. Parssinen did dip back down, though. So he went up to a 44.8, back down to a 41, so maybe not the best pickup. Now, another guy I didn't feature in a weekly video, Emil Andrae. So they've been looking for a power play quarterback. They've lost both of the guys. They had Drysdale in that spot for a little bit. He's out. They also had Cam York in that spot, and he's been injured. So they gave that spot to Emil Andrae. He got a couple of power play points there, actually 1 power play point in 10 games. But you're looking at the hits and blocks, 1.5 hits, 1.3 blocks per game. So he's getting a little bit of peripheral floor, and then he also got some power play time, which he also has a couple of assists there. So again, not the craziest file in terms of a pickup, but with that line assignment, he should be on your radar. Now, he is out tonight, so that's worth noting as he is dealing with some sort of injury. But with that said, if he's back on that power play, they do have a bunch of light night games over the next 2 weeks, so keep that in mind. Now, Ross Johnston, another one of these with not a ton of points, but a ton of hits. So 98th percentile in terms of hits. Only 10 games played, but 3.5 hits per game. That's going to increase his value in a bangers league specifically. And Jordan Martinook, kind of coming out of nowhere. Now, he pops off every now and then, but he's not known as an offensive guy. But 11 points in 17 games, 6 goals, 5 assists. The goal production pretty good. Shot volume a little bit low, and he did have a really nice outburst here. 6 points in his last 6 games. 5 of those were goals, 16 shots in that span as well. So he's been picking it up. And this is one of those cases where, I've kind of started to come around on this a little bit. It's pretty obvious that you should try to pick up players that are on really good offensive teams, but sometimes we don't always know who those are at the beginning of the season or before the season during your draft. So obviously Carolina has come out guns blazing. They are one of the top 5 offensive teams in the league right now, and getting a little bit of that overflow in terms of offensive production is Jordan Martinook. So definitely want to keep that theme in mind as we're going through some of these guys. Now, as we're here, just a quick look at Pettersson. He's been bumped up in a huge way. So up to 11 points in 17 games, which is still underwhelming. There's still more to go here. One thing that I like is his hits and blocks. 1.59 hits, 1.35 blocks per game. So even when he's not scoring goals, he is doing other things to make himself valuable. So that is one of the things that I like about his file as he starts to find his offensive game. Over the last 2 weeks, he's got 5 goals, 2 assists, 4 power play points, 23 shots, 11 hits, and 12 blocks. So a really complete file. The number 3rd overall player in my categories league over that time span. So it's nice to see if you own Pettersson and you held on, you're getting what you wanted to get at the beginning of the season. Ridley Gregg, I think this is a smaller, kind of a peripheral play. So 1.43 hits per game, not a ton of points, only 4 points in those 14 games, and 2 of those on the power play, which is nice. But again, not the most prolific. 3 points in his last 6 games. So maybe a little bit of a sample size bias here. You also have Jared Spurgeon. So Brock Faber is their power play quarterback, but every now and then they do go to Jared Spurgeon. He has 1 power play point on the season. You can see where he's been at. He's been at a 46. He dropped off a cliff here and then kind of bumped back up over the past couple weeks here. So 3 points, 3 assists in his last 6 games. He's got 16 shots and 6 blocks in that span. So getting a couple shot blocks, 1.73 on the season. So that's nice to see from him. Nick Waugh. So this is a play that I talked about on the channel a little bit. He was getting a nice line assignment with Mark Stone out. He was getting that power play spot, 12 points in 18 games, 2 of those on the power play. The shot volume is a little bit low. Power play numbers are not going to be there forever if he doesn't get that line assignment, so keep that in mind. The 1.06 hits is nice, at least to give you a floor. And then with that said, over the past couple games, he's got 5 points in his last 6, 2 goals, 3 assists, and 2 power play points with 17 shots. So making it count, this is one of those waiver wire pickups that probably paid off for you if you grabbed him. A couple of other guys, I'm not going to touch on every single one of these. We know Ovechkin's hot right now as he just scored a hat trick last night. He's up to 23 points in 17 games. You're going to want exposure to him however you can get it. Right now, the best way to do that might be through Alexei Protas. I don't have his ownership off the top of my head. I can look it up real quick. Protas is 24% owned, and here's his file. 1 point per game is really nice to see. 94th percentile in terms of assists. And that's because he's getting that exposure on the top line with Ovechkin. The shot volume is very low, no power play time, no hits or blocks to speak of. So keep that in mind if you're going to grab him. But 6 goals, 11 assists, 17 points on the season is really nice, and that's how you're going to get that exposure to Ovechkin. But as we move a little bit further down, a couple of other guys that we could talk about. Marco Rossi, top line in Minnesota, getting a little bit of exposure on that power play. They're going to need some more offense with Zuccarello out for the next couple of weeks. So they might elevate another winger up there. Keep an eye out on your waiver wire for a winger to pop up on this line assignment with Kaprizov and Rossi. But Rossi's been playing pretty well lately. I picked him up last week. He did pretty well for me. And then they had a really low scoring game last night. I believe it was against Dallas. So not a lot of points to go around there. But 2 goals, 3 assists, 5 points, 2 power play points, 16 shots, and 5 hits in his last 6 games for Marco Rossi. You can see he took a huge jump here when he started scoring some goals. He's been getting some good shot volume over the past couple weeks here, and then trying to round that out with some offensive production, which he did last week. So keep an eye on Marco Rossi as I look up his ownership percentage. I'm going to pull it up. He's only 18% owned, so definitely available for you in a 10-teamer, probably there for you in a 12-teamer, and a pretty decent season so far. 14 points in 17 games for a younger player, finally getting a top line assignment. So that is another nice story. As we move through the rest of these guys, one other, I did want to mention these 2 guys right here. Pius Suter, who was getting some power play time on power play 1. And that's the main reason to grab him. He's getting a good line assignment, and he does take faceoffs. If you're in a faceoff league, he's dual position eligible, center, left wing, only 2% owned. So that is very, very low, and you can probably pick him up in any league size because of that. He does get a ton of faceoff wins, as I mentioned before. I'm trying to pull up his stats as I'm talking. 4 goals in his last 6 games, and I believe, is that 1 power play point. So 14 shots, 4 goals, and a really nice line assignment for Pius Suter. If you're in a really deep league, he's been bumped up and making it count. Not always the most consistent player over the longer haul, but for right now, he's been performing pretty well. Same type of thing for Justin Danforth. Another guy, he's listed as a right winger, but he does also take faceoffs. So that is something that I'm taking a note of. As I'm in one of my leagues is in a face-off heavy league where you get 1 point per face-off win, and those wingers who take those face-offs are huge. And this is not even a player who's listed as dual eligible. He's just a single position right winger, only 1% rostered. So really, really low ownership. 2 goals, 5 assists, 7 points in 14 games. The hits are what the main feature of his file is. 2.14 hits per game, 2.57 shots is really nice as well. And he does get a bunch of face-off wins, as I mentioned before. So this is a guy that should be available in pretty much every league size. But yeah, a lot of these guys have been getting it done. I will touch really briefly on Trevor Moore. One of my waiver wire favorites, usually started off really slow and then kind of picked it up over the last couple games. So 9 points in his last 7, 2 goals, 7 assists, 15 shots in that time span, 13 points on the year. Very assist heavy, but with that said, the shot volume is usually there from him. He is dual position eligible, left wing, right wing. And they obviously lost Victor Arvidsson, but he is still playing with Philip Deneau. I believe they have Kevin Fiala there every now and then. So that's nice line assignment exposure. If you're a Fiala owner like I am, then pairing that with Moore may not be the best option all the time, but when he's hot like this, that's definitely an option. And I'm trying to count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 game point streak for Trevor Moore right now. He's 49% rostered. So he's probably not there for you in a 12-team league, might be there for you in a 10-teamer. Now, I'm not going to go through the rest of these guys. This is most of the guys who are trending in the right direction, but we also want to take a look at some of the guys who are going the opposite direction. And, maybe some guys that you want to think about dropping. Probably not going to go over too many of the, longer season hold type of players, but at least some of these waiver wire guys that are maybe underperforming now, or they peaked really early and now they're starting to drop off and you want them on your radar in terms of potentially dropping these guys. So the first guy we'll touch on is Shayne Gostisbehere. Really, kind of perplexing that he's trending down so hard like this, but the power play quarterback for the Carolina Hurricanes, 13 points on the year in 17 games is not bad. 9 power play points is really nice as well. But in his last 6 games, only 1 point. It was a power play assist, so that is the silver lining. Only 1 point, only 4 shots, 4 hits, and 5 blocks in that 6-game span. So under 1 per game for hits and blocks, which is pretty much what he's averaging here on the season, 0.53 blocks per game. But the power play numbers are the main reason to own him, and only 1 power play point in the last 6 games, and Carolina has been scoring. So that is something to keep an eye on. I wouldn't necessarily run out and go out and grab Brent Burns, but Dmitry Orlov has been playing really well 5-on-5. So if you're looking for another defenseman who's a little bit hotter at the moment, still not going to get those power play points though. So maybe hold on to Gostisbehere if you're wondering about that right now. Another guy who was red hot at the beginning of the season in terms of peripherals, maybe not offensive production, is Mo Seider. He's calmed down just a little bit. So 6 games played over this span, 3 assists, 2 power play points, which is nice that he's getting a little bit more usage on that power play. Shot volume is still a little bit low. The hits and blocks have kind of come back down to earth, but they're still excellent. So 3.18 hits per game, 2.24 blocks is elite level for a hits blocks type of defenseman. And if he's going to start getting some power play time, that will obviously make him a little bit more valuable. I don't know if they love Gustafsson on that top power play, so that could be a favorable factor for Mo Seider. So in this case, I would potentially go out there and try to float a low trade offer on Seider. At the beginning of the year, he was basically not going to get traded because everybody was aware of how dominant he was in terms of hits and blocks. Some of the numbers that were coming out were crazy, like 8, 9 hits and blocks per game. He's kind of come back to earth, which was to be expected, but just want to bring this to your attention that it's been a very steady decline, except for this one bump from the 30th to the 2nd and then all the way back down. He has bumped back up. This is probably where those power play points come in here towards the tail end. Now, one other guy, I'm not going to go over Philip Forsberg and Kyle Connor. You're going to hold on to them, but Joel Eriksson Ek has been a relatively disappointing player, at least in terms of guys that I've asked. So I asked our Discord groups for some of their most disappointing players, and Eriksson Ek's name was brought up. He is day-to-day. He's been dealing with something lower body, but it hasn't been going that well at all. Only 1 assist in his last 6 games, and this is indicative maybe of that injury. So 13 shots in 6 games is a little bit low as well. He's averaging 2.36, so that's below that number. The assist didn't really bump up his assist numbers, even though those are pretty low, and he's been on a steady decline basically since October 26th. So this is worth mentioning as it is probably the worst his file has looked in a number of years. With all of that said, he's still relatively high owned, so 82% rostered. And the reason for that is he's one of the most complete players in fantasy when he's on his game. So right now it's not going for him. The peripherals are a little bit low. 1.5 hits is decent. He does take faceoffs. So if you're in a faceoff league, that's obviously going to make him even more valuable. The power play numbers should go up, especially with Zuccarello off that power play. They're going to have to, lean on guys like Boldy, Eriksson Ek, maybe even Marco Rossi a little bit more to get those power play points. So he might start to see a little bit of a bump there. Only 2 power play points on the year so far. So hopefully he can get the power play points going, and that will help to boost his offensive numbers, which seem to be bringing his whole file down. Now, the shot blocks used to be there a little bit more, so I would like to see a little bit more of that. The injury might be preventing him from hitting anymore, so that's also possibly what's causing this. But yeah, I would definitely buy low on Eriksson Ek if you can. If not, I would definitely hold on to him. I wouldn't panic at this point. Now, in terms of, I'm not going to go too deep into Brady Skjei, but this is a theme with a lot of the players. So the 3 players that they picked up, Nashville picked up in the offseason, have not been panning out. Now, Stamkos did have a 2-goal night in Vancouver, He likes to play against Vancouver for whatever reason. Hopefully that gets him going. But him, Marchessault, and Skjei are all significant minus players. So if you're in a plus-minus league, they're all really bad in that metric. And then with all of that said, in the last 8 games, Brady Skjei has no points at all. Only 10 shots, 12 hits, 12 blocks. So he is still getting a couple of blocks. He's still not a hitter. He's mostly known for his goal scoring. I believe he had 17 goals last year, and he hasn't been doing much of that either. So 2 goals in 19 games, only 7 points, 1 power play point. So he really needs to get going. Maybe needs to find some sort of comfort zone in this new offense, this new system. This team has to start coming together, as they are one of the lowest scoring teams in the league, and that is preventing them from winning games. They do have an elite goaltender. They should have a pretty decent decor, but they have been struggling to score. So did want to mention that here. One other thing, Jake Sanderson. So I have Thomas Chabot in a couple of my leagues, and the reason I picked him up is he's playing really well 5-on-5. Sanderson was excellent to start the year. He starts off at a 77, and it's been a pretty steep decline since then, and there hasn't really been any upticks. Now, he still has good production, 10 points in 17 games overall, 9 power play points. He was the power play feature, and probably still is at this point, but they might start to give a little bit more of a look to Chabot, as he's still playing really well. And Sanderson has kind of faded off a little bit. So 2 assists, both on the power play in his last 6 games, 13 shots, 14 blocks, only 2 hits in that span. So you're getting blocks. 2.41 blocks per game is nice. The power play numbers on the season have been there, only 2 power play points in the last 6. And then when you compare that to Thomas Chabot in the last 2-week span, he's got 5 assists, 1 on the power play, 21 shots, 7 hits, and 12 blocks. So a little bit better showing from Chabot over the past couple of weeks here. I don't necessarily think this is a huge development. Chabot did have a 4-game point streak in that stretch, and the peripherals have been really nice. So that is one thing that I'm excited about. But if you own Jake Sanderson, I wouldn't necessarily panic. They're probably still going to feature him on the power play, and this is not necessarily a longer-term trend, although you do see a pretty significant decline. I think he just started really, really hot. I think the equilibrium is somewhere in this 60 to 70 range. Sean Monahan, another guy who has been, kind of falling off a cliff over the past, the 9th all the way up to the 16th. So pretty consistent in this 63, 64 range for most of the season. And then he has taken a step back. They have had a couple of injuries. They had a couple of their wingers started to decline in their production. Chinakhov, Marchenko went a little bit cold there. Monahan, 3 assists in his last 6 games, no hits, only 14 shots, and 3 blocks. So not a lot of peripheral floor. The shot volume on the season is really nice at 2.88. That's 93rd percentile. The points should be there. He's going to get all the top minutes. He's the top center. He should be getting the top power play time. So this should be a bump in the road. And this is not necessarily a file that you're going to have to worry about too much because of that line assignment and the exposure that you're getting to all their top players. But he's 26% owned right now. So at this point, in a good week, I would still look to Monahan. But if you're holding him and hoping that he can bounce back this particular week, maybe throw him back on the wire and then grab him in a week where they have a 4-game week. Couple other guys, Brandon Montour started out incredibly hot. This is a guy that I was looking at in terms of a trade target, and I owned him last year. I wasn't too excited about his offensive production last year. I figured it was injury related, and that seemed to be the case. Now, in his last, I'm trying to count here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games, only 2 points, and he's gone pointless in his last 4. So he was the power play quarterback. He had that 1 game with 3 goals and an assist, a 4-point game. That was against Montreal on the 29th. But basically since then, only 2 assists. He has been getting the peripherals, so he's still shooting the puck, which is nice to see. He's still getting a bunch of hits. He does have a really complete file, 79 in terms of completeness rating. But it is worth noting that Vince Dunn is slated to come back within the next week or 2, and he could potentially vie for some power play time. If you own Brandon Montour and you're worried about any of this, I would look to get out from under him now because when Dunn comes back and they share that power play time, I wouldn't necessarily think that that's a positive for Montour's offensive production. The good thing is he's still putting up a good peripheral floor. 3.22 shots per game is 96th percentile in general, let alone for a defenseman. I remember from the defensive numbers last year, this would put him top in the league. I believe Dahlin was number 1 last year. It might have been Hamilton in a small sample size, but they were under 3 shots per game. So this is definitely a really nice peripheral floor. He's just not necessarily performing offensively lately. That's pretty much going to do it. I don't want to go too deep into a lot of these guys. Just wanted to give you a couple of players that are trending up and trending down. If you want access to the Player Hub, again, as always, the link is in the description below. I will continue to add stuff to this, so it will continue to evolve. I update it daily, so this will also continue to update. The goaltending hub, I update once a week because the goaltending is usually not as active. You only get 2 or 3 starts per week, so it's not worth updating every day. But this, there does seem to be enough games every day where I do update it daily, so that is something that you can take advantage of in the description below. But thank you again for watching. As always, I'll see you in the next one.